For more on what might lie ahead for Julian Assange, we're now joined by his mother, Christine Assange, on the line from Australia. Christine, thanks very much for being with us here in the program. Now, Julian hasn't been charged yet, but he's already seeking political asylum. So why now? Isn't it too early to take such a step?
Julian not only hasn't been charged, he hasn't even been questioned despite asking the Swedish government to do so for the last 2 years. Concern is, of course, that given the flagrant abuses of his human and legal rights in the Swedish case for 2 years, their refusal to adhere to their own police procedures and their own prosecutorial standards, that were he to go to Sweden, where he would be jailed straight away, uncharged and unquestioned, he would not have the opportunity then to seek political asylum.
Well, you know, Ecuador has an extradition treaty with the United States. So even if a Latin American state gives the green light and shelters your son, do you think he's going to be 100% safe there?
Ecuador, I believe, does have an extradition treaty, but if it's ascertained from investigation that the person seeking asylum is actually a political prisoner, then they don't hand that prisoner over. Now, this is something that all nations have signed up, many nations have signed up to, but a lot of them aren't actually acting upon it, including the UK, who should have turned down that European arrest warrant coming from Sweden, because Julian had made himself very much available for questioning Sweden, unlike what much of the mainstream media and our own Attorney General is saying to the public. He could not get the Swedes to actually question him on the second time the rape allegation was raised. First of all, it was quashed by the first time it was raised was quashed within 24 hours by the chief prosecutor of Stockholm. Woman SW said she'd been railroaded and refused to finish the interview and sign her statement. It was then resurrected within 10 days by a politician lawyer running for the election, and woman AA, who is also running for the election. She submitted a condom, which she said Julian had torn, but upon investigation by the forensic department, there was no DNA evidence. It was appealed to a radical feminist prosecutor. They shopped around till they found one, and this prosecutor upheld the appeal, and Julian was not even told about the hearing. And so these abuses of his human rights and legal rights within Sweden went on and on and on. He then was given permission to leave Sweden on the 15th of September by the prosecutor, Marion Nye. He offered to fly back in because he had business arrangements with his partners in publishing Cablegate. He then offered to fly back in on the 9th and the 10th of October. She said, we can't do that because it's the weekend. Then he offered to fly back in on the 11th of October. We can't do that because it's too far away. He then stayed at the Journalists Club in London while he was releasing the Iraq war logs and preparing for Cablegate. And he offered during this time to be interviewed via a protocol that Sweden and the UK are both signatories to, which is called mutual legal assistance, and that would be that he would be interviewed via video link or Skype. The Swedish prosecutor refused this as well for 2 months. Just before Cablegate was published, she obtained a European arrest warrant for questioning, and then issued a red notice. And then once Julian had been detained in Britain for 17 months, she has continued to refuse to question him at either Scotland Yard or the Swedish Embassy. And my son says the reason for this is that once he's questioned, then they have to either let him go or charge him.
All right.
And obviously they have no evidence to charge him. That's why they're not questioning him. And people who have studied this case believe it is nothing more than a holding case for a US extradition.
Well, Christine, let's now talk about the reaction to this in Canberra. I mean, in Australia, his own native country. Earlier, Julian, as we know, said he was abandoned by his own country, Australia. So what reaction would you like to have seen from Canberra at this point?
Well, unfortunately, we have a puppet government in Australia. It's run by the US. But I would have liked to have seen, except for the Greens, I would like to have seen the Australian government stand up and have some independence from US foreign policy and to say, no, what you're doing is persecuting a journalist who's not been charged with anything under your own First Amendment, has done nothing wrong. Allowed to publish by cables, and they didn't stand up. They should have stood up. They should have carpeted the Swedish ambassador over the fact that they'd breached all their own legislation and taken out a European arrest warrant when they shouldn't. They should have protested vehemently to the UK government for its disgraceful display during the hearings. I mean, unheard of in the last hearing that a Supreme Court, a Court of Appeal, would introduce new evidence at the appeal. Absolutely unheard of. They should have protested that vehemently. They should have protested to the US that the calls were being made to incite murder upon my son. They should have protested that the grand jury being run by the US is not a due legal process. It has no judge, 4 prosecutors, no defence material is allowed, and the jury comes from a pool of US military contractors. They should have protested all of those things. They've done nothing. In fact, they've aided and abetted the US in persecuting my son.